Working Cows Podcast, episode 357.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, recorded exclusively in the Understanding Ag Studios, and I'm very excited to be joined today by Alejandro Carillo, and we're going to talk to him today about his context and some of the things that he's been doing there and some of the changes that he's seen over time. And this is in part just to help get the word out about a webinar that Alejandro will be joining us for coming up April 4th, Thursday, April 4th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. There will be a link in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/357. You can go there, click on the link, sign up for the webinar, and then join us live, and there will be an opportunity to ask your questions about planning for and preparing for drought so that you can plan now rather than pay later. So, Alejandro, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here, Clay.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been good to kind of get to know you a little bit as I've sought out some of the content that you've that's been captured of different talks that you've given recently. Just getting ready to talk to you here today, and then also on the webinar here on April 4th. I wanted to kind of start out today talking to you about the context of your context, the Chihuahuan Desert. And one of the things that I found interesting is that maybe what is there now in the Chihuahuan Desert isn't what's always been there. And maybe what's even more surprising is how recently it was different than it is now. So could you share with me a little bit of your understanding of the Chihuahuan Desert context and what it is now and what it has been in the recent past?
You know, actually, we have some written records of the first colonizers, Spaniards, at least back 400 years ago, when they came to these lands, and all we have here was just tall grasses. I think we get excited when we get this in the Chihuahuan Desert, these grama side oats and blue, black gramas. But I can tell you that probably at some time they consider those like invasive grasses. And yeah, it used to be all tall grasses. I don't know if you can identify like on a saddle the tapaderas, which is to cover your boots. Mm-hmm. Well, some people might think that the original cowboys or vaqueros used to do that for thorns, but they used to do that not to get their boots wet among, so obviously, then even as recently, we have a map dating back to 1850. It was like a statistical map of every state in Mexico. And then I was looking at the one in Chihuahua. And we got incredible weather, but also otters and beavers all across the state. Think about that. It's pretty incredible. So, there was an abundance of grass, an abundance of tall grass. But when there's abundance, there's really little motivation to change. So I think it was the arrival of the fence that actually stopped the movement of the cows. And then we start overgrazing some plants or overresting other plants. And now we are where we are, which is a very tough situation, because I think in the last 6 years, we've been getting below average rain. But last year was quite challenging because we only got like between 2 and 3 inches the whole year.
Yeah. Yep. No, I've got some friends, people that I would say have become friends over the course of the Working Cows podcast in the Chihuahuan Desert. And it is a tough place to ranch, but it also seems to me, maybe I have a skewed perspective, but it seems to me a fairly high percentage of people who are finding ways to thrive there. There seems to be quite a few guys down there who are actually thriving and doing really well. Can you give me some examples of where you guys started on this journey and how long ago, and some of the ways that the landscape has changed over time?
Yes. Actually, I think the people and myself, consider myself, we were very fortunate to ranch in Chihuahua, because the state of Chihuahua in northern Mexico, it used to be one of the more forward thinker states regarding aggressive management. So in my case, when I got back after working in IT for information technology for 15 years, and I came back to the ranch, I was very fortunate to meet 5, 6 people who were actually being holistic managers for at least 15 years. So they mentor me, they help me, and then, we keep making progress, but we got really nice foundations, because what we do and where we do it, you really need to have it's not simple. I mean, it's not a simple endeavor, and really the mentoring really sets you apart. So we were very fortunate that now probably those 15 years that they have, plus another 15 plus, so you're talking about 35, 40 years under different way of doing things.
Sure. And so when did you return from the IT career?
That was back in 2004, and then I took my first holistic management class here in Chihuahua in 2006. And from then, we start doing trials and learning and traveling also, to other countries, including obviously the US, but also South America and Africa and Australia. And we also come out with a nonprofit organization that every time we found a good grazer, we actually brought him back to Chihuahua, so more people got access to education, and that's still going. We're very fortunate to have those kind of annual events where people can update, but also relate and to each other and meet new regen ranchers. So right now, Chihuahua is very cool because we have ranches going from in let's say average year, right? Going from 6 inches to 10 inches to 15 inches to 20 inches, going from 2,000 feet. I mean, it's all high deserts because we're between two mountain ranges, to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,000. So it's pretty cool because there's really no more excuse to say, I mean, I can tell you, so what kind of ranch do you want to see? What precipitation, what elevation, and then we'll find more than one of those ranches, so you can see that it works on pretty much any environment within our state.
Right. Yep. And so you come back from the IT career in 2004. You're mentored by guys who have been doing this for 15 years at that point, and you take your holistic management course and start. So you've been on this journey yourself for about 20 years, and then you've got guys in your neighborhood who are 35, 40 years on this journey. So can you tell me about some of the changes that you've seen in on your place over that period of time, and then maybe even talk about the value of being able to see guys who've been doing it longer than you and see, well, in another 10 or 15 years, this is maybe where I could be. And so, yeah, just talk to me about some of those changes you've been seeing.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to work with several conservation organizations, mostly bird organizations, that they are trying to protect the migratory birds coming from southern Canada, northern US to overwinter in the Chihuahuan Desert. So they've been keeping track of the birds, they've been keeping track of the plants, the diversity. So when I started, my dad has 6 big pastures across our 30,000 acre ranch, and I believe cattle spread all over the place. So the cattle were pretty much overgrazing, and there was a lot of bare ground. Actually, my dad has like a present for me when on that year on 2004, because we have 20 inches of rain. That was a bit crazy. But reality is that we didn't do much with those 20 inches. It's like a big celebration, Oh, cool. I mean, it's actually raining every month. But then on the next year in April, we were already in a drought because we were not really able to infiltrate much water. That was the reality. Hard pan, a lot of runoff, a lot of destruction with these big storms. So I think always our message is, don't tell me how much rain you get, tell me how much rain you actually keep.
Mm-hmm.
And then working with the bird guys, it took us, obviously, we got to grow more grass. But I think we went from 10 to 20 perennial grasses. The last count was a year ago, and they were able to count 100 different grasses.
Wow.
The other thing that was pretty cool is that, I think we've been building a very good relationship with the bird organizations. And now they understand that what is good for the cows is good for the birds. Sometimes they ask me, we found this endangered bird on one of your spots. What are you going to be doing? Well, I'm going to be doing the same because it's working for you, it's working for me. Mm. And I think the very important lesson that we need to understand is our context. We don't really get any help from the government. So actually, we want the government to stay away from our properties. But that's really good. I mean, we don't actually get any water rights. I think all those factors really have pushes. I mean, like low precipitation, no water for irrigation, no subsidies. And that's what's really helping us to actually push a little bit harder into make work what we have. Make it work without much, crutches and also it did not only push us to do better grazing management, but also to get better genetics, because we're firm believers that since day one, you got to start with a good grazing management, but also you got to start selecting and calling from a herd livestock that will actually help you, not drag you, into the regeneration process.
Yeah, for sure. Could you talk to me a little bit about what you have seen on those other places that are maybe have been doing this for longer periods of time, and you look ahead and see, in another 10 or 15 years, maybe we'll be there as well. So can you tell me about some of the things that you see going on there that are different than what are happening at your place?
Yeah, definitely those places have been able to not only lower the cost, because for me, one very key element is how can we extend the green season. Not only how we can cover more ground, get a better basal cover and better skin in soil, like increase the biomass, but also increase also the quality of the biomass. And why we're so keen into the green stuff, for two things. Because if our grasses, when we joined the ranch, were lasting only 6 months green, because perennial grasses in poor soils, they were very sick, they shut down. They actually behave like an annual grasses. Now, in some spots of the ranch, we're able to have a little bit of green during the non-growing season, and that is enough for a couple of very important things. First one is we can actually keep feeding the microbiology, particularly the mycorrhizal fungi. So we keep the aggregation going, and that means that we have air in the soil, and that means that we can infiltrate the water. And the second is we can actually be very low-cost producers, because the cows, if we don't have green, we gotta supplement the cows. But if we can grow a little bit of green, then that will allow us to go year-round with minimal or no supplementation. So what we have seen in other ranches is, obviously, besides increasing the quality and quantity of the biomass, but also increasing the herd numbers, the livestock numbers, which is pretty cool, because now, obviously, our first goal was to reduce the inputs. Because when I joined the ranch, we were feeding like 6 months. That makes sense to me, because if you don't have green during 6 months, you gotta supplement. And that was probably what breaking the ranch. And so once we were able to actually, lower that cost, then we're seeing an increase in our livestock. Now, things have not been easy lately because, we've been getting below average, but we don't feel the droughts the same way other ranches feel it. You need to consider that our state, at some point, I don't know, 50 years ago, we used to run 3 million cows. Now we're on only like 500,000 cows because a lot of people are pretty much dispersing the herds.
Right. So what were some of the changes that you made to get to that point? I think early on you mentioned that you had 6 pastures on 30,000 acres, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like maybe you didn't even have all the cows in one place at one time. There might be more than one group of cows in different pastures at one time. So can you talk to me about that process of change and some of the economics of that? You said we've been doing it, without government subsidies, which I agree with you. It would be better not to have those things. If we could also get the tax relief of, if we could do both of those at once, lower the taxes and take the subsidy away, I would take that all day long. So you've been doing this without a subsidy or without any kind of program. You have help from bird organizations, but that's private money, and yay for that. So can you talk to me about how you've developed that infrastructure over time and where you're at now compared to where you were at when you started?
So the first goal that we had was to actually move from those 8 to 10 paddocks to 55. So we made some investments but it was pretty conventional fence. We actually did not use like barbed wire, but it was still like T-post and smooth wire and non-electric. And then we stayed there for a few years, probably 5, 6, 7 years. And we were moving, but I feel, we make some progress, but I also feel that we at some point reach up like a plateau, because we were not seeing much of a diversity on the grasses. We never were able to get over 20 different perennial grasses, which was good, But I think we all ranchers need to strive to get not dozens, but hundreds of different grasses, because we believe that the more diversity you have, the more resilient it's going to be in your ranch. And that's when we went to a class in the US with Johan Sisman. And he was talking about having hundreds of paddocks, I said, well, that sounds cool. And then we already have like a water pond, water trough in the middle of each of those 55 pastures. So like 6 years ago, we started building one wire permanent electric fence. So we subdivided those 55. So we ended up getting like 350, 400 permanent electric fence paddocks. And then that's where we actually stopped the investment. But also we start seeing a big difference because there were smaller paddocks. That means that it forced us to move faster. So we were moving 6 years ago, daily moves. We used to do like a 3 days, every 3 days when we had the 55. Now we're moving daily. And now, but we always tell people that they need to build some flexibility into their system. So our flexibility is we cross fence those 300, 400, 350 permanent electric fence. Now, it will really depend on the day, the season, the rainfall, and so on. For example, back in 2022, we got good rains. We got like a big rainstorm that dropped like 8-9 inches in a week. But because we were ready, to keep a lot of that water. Then we ended up with like about 1,000 paddocks. We have to subdivide. 2 years ago, we were already moving twice a day. So we subdivided the paddocks in such a way that we were giving half a day of feed for the cattle. And last year was a pretty bad year. I mean, like between 2-3 inches, 4 inches at most in some places. And then we went back to the 350 paddocks. So we actually combining a more intentional grazing, like more frequent moves, but also that with a longer periods. And I think that's what's really giving us a lot of resilient, in a drought. Because recently we finished with stockpile from 2022, and then we start grazing the 2023, which was not much, but that gave us all that time. I think we're becoming more conservative nowadays in Chihuahua because things are getting very erratic. Before I joined the ranch, the droughts were like, the wars were like at 8 inches per year. I mean, give me 8 inches and I'll do a lot of stuff now. And now the droughts are 4, and then last year 2. So I think we need to recognize that things are getting more difficult. And then I think we are more comfortable with having at least, of a stockpile grass, if not year and a half.
Yeah, very good. There's a lot there I want to come back to. But one thing you mentioned there was extending the green season. You mentioned that earlier on, and that becomes important to not having to supplement, right? So could you give me a little bit of a picture of where or what kind of you said that when you guys started, you were feeding hay for 6 months, and maybe somebody sitting in North Dakota, South Dakota thinks, well, that's crazy. Why would you feed hay when you don't have any snow? And, because I think our mentality is you feed hay when cows can't get through the snow in a lot of places. But that's not the only reason people feed hay throughout the world. So what you guys were feeding hay for other reasons. Obviously, it wasn't snow cover that was keeping you from being able to graze, right?
Yeah, the main reason was that there was no green at all. I mean, our soils were so compacted because of the way we manage. Or grasses were so sick, like very shallow rooted. I mean, and I'm talking about perennials, not even annuals. The perennial grasses, you can pull it with your hands. I mean, the soil was so compacted, so much bare ground, so high temps, that at the end of the rainy season, let's say October, November, we did have more green grass. So if you don't have green grass, you gotta supplement. It doesn't matter if you have snow or not. We do have a little bit. We used to have more snow every year. Now it snows like every other year. Obviously, nothing compared to the Dakotas or something like that. But there are different challenges. And also, a very important thing is the selection. You really want to. We always often call in the bottom of the herd as often as once a month. We don't wait, because if you think about it, Clay, most of the decisions about what to do at that point is based on the poor performers. It's not based on your average, or it's not based on your top performer cows. We're always trying to get those back. Or if those poor performers have lice, you treat them all. Or if those have thin condition, you speed it up or you open up the paddocks, So that's why it's very important for us to wear a couple of hats when we're with our cows. The first one is the predator hat, where we compare the peers. We don't compare against like 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 body conditions. We always are comparing what are the cows. So, for example, if you set like a 24% culling rate per year, and we're culling every month, then that means that we're culling the bottom 2% every month. So what happened if those cows, one of those cows, Well, obviously based on body condition or hair coat or anything that requires our time is gone. Because then how are we expecting? Right now we're running 500 cows. How are we expecting with the same people to run 1,000 cows? Well, we need really the cows to help us because it's that famous role where 20% of the cows give you 80% of the problems. So we're trying to get rid of that bottom 20, in my case, 24%. Obviously, that percentage is set by each one different, but also by the year. Obviously, I'm calling harder right now during a drought. But just to give you like average or a little bit below average rainfall, and then what if a cow is pregnant? Well, we sell it as pregnant. But we don't want those cows because then they will affect our daily decisions.
Yeah. No, I think that's one of the more powerful lessons I've learned over the last 6 years of doing this podcast is when you supplement the herd, you supplement the ones that didn't need it as well as the ones that did, and you're only benefiting whatever percentage of the ones that didn't need it when all the other ones would have probably gotten bred, raised a respectable calf without the supplement. So I think that's an important lesson.
It is indeed. What we do with those calls, we take them to a nice one of those 55 paddocks are still permanent. We open up all the gates, and then we put those cows there. So they actually it's a well rested stockpile. They select it, they bounce back, and then we sell them. It's just one way out. There's no like, oh, let's help this cow get it on track and get it back. I'm sorry, but it's just we got a partner who's the butcher.
Right. Do you have a sense of how long it took you to recoup the investment cost of the further subdivision from 55 to 350? Do you have a sense of how long it took to make that investment back as far as paying for it?
Yeah, it's going to be about 10 years to recoup the whole investment from where we start, from when we moved to 10 to 55. Moving from 55 to 300, actually the foundation was already laid because it was only about putting the water was already there. It was only about putting this one wire electric fence, which was really not that expensive.
Right, because you said
the initial investment was heavy one.
You said that when you went from 10 to 55, that was pretty conventional fence. Is that right?
Pretty conventional, and then one trough at the center or every 55, the every 55 pastures. Yeah, that's when we actually invested the more. Now to go from 55 to 355, obviously it does involve labor, but I'm more talking about the investment. The initial investment that we made on water troughs, on pipe. We're now on wells. Actually not probably. Not building new wells, but also revamping for, let's say, going from windmills to submersible pumps or solar systems. Now they are focused because I think we're already almost done with all the fences. It seems like it never ends, right? But all our water system is on a 2-inch pipe, but now we're putting a 3-inch pipe. We're replacing the 2-inch with a 3-inch pipe on the main line, the main water line. And that, because right now we can actually go up to, let's say, 700 cows. But our goal is to go to 1,000, 1,200 cows. And that's, the water is the foundation of the whole system. And we have to have really reliable water to actually go and plan whatever we want to do, to go based on the current daily needs.
Right. Where did you start in 2004? How many cows were on the ranch at that time?
My dad was running 150 cows at the ranch, and then he got another 100 cows on a leased land. And then slowly, we've been increasing we were at a point that we got like 700 cows, but we got out of stock because of the droughts. But at least, we're keeping those 500 cows. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in a severe drought where used to be 8 inches was reliable, or even maybe 8 inches was a drought year, now you're talking 4 inches, 2 inches. You're still running twice as many cows. Is that what you're telling me?
Oh, no. Yes. And also remember, Clay, that one of the differences, the amount of money that we used to spend, like 6 months, it's not only that we were running fewer cows, but we were also supplementing. And now the only supplementation we give to our cows is sea salt. And that's it. We don't give anything else.
Yeah. That's an incredible change. I appreciate that. I want to shift gears a little bit here, and talk about one of the interesting things as I was listening to one of the talks you've given recently was you mentioned the limiting factor. And we're here talking a lot about inches of rain, per year. And, when we think about managing for drought, that's usually what we're thinking about, is that we're not going to get as much rain. So we need to make a plan to destock and do other things. But you had a different limiting factor than just rain, at least as I understood it in that talk. Could you talk to me about some of the other limiting factors that you think about as far as good, productive soil is concerned?
Yes, Clay. So if we think about the soil, I think we all think about the grass productivity. We all think about the water, right? I mean, we need the water. We need the rainfall. We need the water. We need but I think the limiting factor is air in the soil. Is this aggregation, is that air that, and then that now we go back to how do we put air in the soil? Because there was a study done in Chihuahua and also in Colorado, and we were not too far from each other, that we only filtrate 40% of the rainfall that we get. So you're talking that we are, let's say, in a 9-inch, we're really getting not even 4 inches per year. So we already created a drought for us. Because why? Because our soils are compacted. Because the soils are not lacking air. Now, if you see a root system, the root system of any grass, even including corn, it doesn't matter how much you irrigate that corn. If you take a look at because, tillage, obviously that's a different problem, is tilling the land will compact the land. And then it doesn't matter if the moisture is under the root cannot go farther than where the air is. I mean, as I sometimes ask ranchers, tell me how many days you live without water. 3 days. How about without air? Well, just probably hours. So the root system really needs, in order for you to have a deep rooted system, you need moisture, but also you need air in the soil. And it's not through mechanical ways that we're going to open the soil. It's really to a photosynthesis, a green plant doing photosynthesis, feeding the microbiology, and that specifically mycorrhizal fungi will actually create the glues or the aggregation that will open up the soil. So instead of us getting 4 inches, like 40%, we could get more, 30% more, and that will make a big difference.
Yeah. Yep. Very good. No, I really appreciate that change in paradigm of looking at getting air into the soil, and then honestly, when you have pore space, that's how the water gets in too, right? That's how you get the water in. And then when you have well aggregated soils, that's how you get your roots to go down rather than sideways. And when they go down, they can get down to, lower stores of water and things like that aren't as that don't evaporate as quickly. Is that kind of also contributing to what you're talking about?
Yes, and we need to think about, Clay, that the macro herd, what we call the microbiology, the macro herd really depends on the plant, and the plant depends on the macro herd. The plant doesn't have a gut like us, the gut of the plant is the microbiology. So because they depend on each other to live, then when it rains, it's not only the aggregation that allows the water to infiltrate, but also the microbes there hold the water for the plant. So when the plant needs water, the water is there. So yeah, it's pretty cool because then you may say, how can you have green grasses after 10 months of no rain because of that particular effect? So it's all like a, compounding effect. Saying, okay, yeah, you were able to infiltrate the water? Yeah. Are you able to hold the water? Yeah. Why? Because you have aggregation, you have the microbiology, but also because of the grazing that we did, we must have created also some litter in soil, some skin in soil, so that will actually reflect, the heat. Because in our world, where we are in the Chihuahuan Desert, in the middle of the summer, you can measure the temperatures in bare ground. They say that the air temperature is, 100 and 100. We have seen 160 Fahrenheit on the soil temp. And then we move to ranch where we have good thick grasslands, and it's 80. So it's just like exponential effect,
Right. Yep, for sure. As I said in the opening, you'll be joining me and Jim Falstick for the South Dakota Grassland Coalition's Drought Plan Now or Pay Later webinar. Could you give me a little bit of a preview of what you plan to share on that webinar?
Yes. What we're planning to share is how, first of all, for ranchers to be more observant, whether they're going forward and backwards, what they need to see. I think we are spending too much time fighting nature. Like, do we really understand that I cannot go from bare ground to 7 feet tall grasses that we have developed with just 6 inches? So we have to respect the succession of plants, and that means going from bare ground to weeds, and then to annuals and perennials, and then better perennials, and so on. Yeah, actually, it's more like a challenging the paradigms, and then also raising the bar in terms of don't graze, don't do your grazing management to promote 10, 20 grasses. Do your grazing management to promote 100, 200 different grasses. And how about forbs, I see the grasses as really being our allies to fix the water cycle. So once our grasses help the first water cycle, then we're going to have way more forbs, which will help our cattle to actually get in a much better condition. Because forbs need that moisture, but also forbs will always have more energy and protein than grasses.
Yeah, and I think a lot of those forbs also are pretty important as far as cattle managing their parasite load too, right? And taking care of some of those internal and external parasites, as I understand it anyways.
I didn't know, but that makes sense. A better diet.
Yeah. And maybe I'm thinking of a different plant group of plants that helps with that. But anyways, I know guys like Fred Provenza and a lot of those have been doing work on those kinds of things and what they're grazing and how that impacts the way that they're dealing with parasites. So anyways, yes, no, I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to being an MC for the webinar. And as I said in the opening, you can find the link in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/357. So there will be a link there, but we'll continue on with this conversation that we're having. I just got a couple of more notes here that we haven't covered yet that I'd like to just drill down on a little bit more. What do you think is going to be the thing that has to change, or what are the conditions that are going to have to exist for you to be able to go from 500 cows to 1,200 cows? You said that was your goal, to get to 1,200 cows. What is going to have to be different than what's going on now?
I think the only difference, the way we are managing is right. I think we are going forward, but the water needs to be there. We got to make sure that we can water more than 1,000 cows in order to be able to do that. But
Sure.
I think the way we're managing right now is promoting more diversity, better shape, better leaf to stem ratio of the grasses. And it's really, that's why we're very focused on developing the water first on our base places, and then later on the most degraded.
Right. And so that's where the transition from a 2-inch line to a 3-inch line comes in, is getting that higher capacity.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Flow rate.
Right.
I think the most important thing is the flow rate. I don't think we need to change any of the troughs because cattle learn to take turns as long as when it's their turn, the trough is full,
Yeah. Right.
Because if it is not, if it is not full, and let's say that the cows can reach the water, but if that cow has a calf and that calf couldn't reach the water, the cow's gonna leave and the calf will not drink water, and then you're gonna start seeing problems on the weakest link of the herd, which is the calves. So we gotta make sure that if we got 30 cows drinking at once on our round troughs, then the flow rate should be able to keep that full for 30 cows, and then for the next and the next and the next one. Yeah. Now the other thing that we have seen is that the closer the water to the animals, the more often they drink. They don't drink once a day; they drink multiple times per day on small groups. So that will be way more efficient for the cows, the performance of the cows and the whole herd. But also, it will put less pressure on the water system instead of all of them just going all at once.
Sure. How often do you currently come through the same paddock? Will it be once a year, or is it longer than that, or less than that?
I think normally once a year. It was just that 2022 we got so much grass that we went back to the same paddock like in 18 months. But the rest periods need to be determined by context. We just cannot say do 1 year or do 6 months or do 2 years. Even within my ranch, it varies a lot because I know that if I give my Monterey ranch or the Sierra 3 years, there's no detrimental quality on the grasses. But if I do even 2 years on our bottoms or flats, that Tobosa grass is going to get pretty ugly, all oxidized.
Yep.
Maybe because, through the years, it was more pounded, the flats, but it is what it is today. It may change in the future, but yeah. Right. So yeah, rest periods really will depend. For example, in South America, we've been in some countries, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil. They were giving 30 days of rest. And now they moved to 60 days, and now they're seeing a lot of benefits. Even with tropical grasses getting quite rough, the diversity that they're promoting from 30 to 60 days is worth it for the animals to perform better than trying to reach that grass at the optimal point.
Right. Yep. Giving it an opportunity to mature, and then I think a big part of it, as I understand it, is as we vary the season of use, then the plants that like to grow in that season get to express themselves, and you get them. That's how you get more diversity. Is that kind of what you've been observing as well?
Yeah, definitely is you want to get some disruption, saying don't graze the same spot the same time every year. But also, as you extend the rest periods, you're gonna have more diversity. Most likely, you're gonna have more legumes and forbs that you didn't see. Even for example, in our context, grazing multiple times per year will not give you that diversity, and I think that's a big deal in most of the Western U.S. People are doing sometimes, very good job of grazing, but they're returning too soon to the same paddocks or pastures.
Right. Yep. Last thing I had on my list here was to talk. You mentioned the importance of genetics. How have you gone about that process of changing the genetics on your place? What have been some of the keys for you that you've focused on?
Yeah, I think it's important for you to have something that you like, even though that may be a bit subjective, but still, you want to enjoy when you see your cows. And then from then on, we've been trying to source from good, low maintenance genetics, like some of them in Mexico, some of them in the US. And then definitely nobody's going to sell you a bull that will solve all your issues. This is just the beginning. I mean, it's good to source these low maintenance cattle, but that is just the beginning of the journey. So what we are doing is what we were explaining before, like calling often the bottom, but also the top performers. We select the bulls from the top performing cows. I mean, like bull calves that look like a bull, behave like a bull. We tag them during branding. We separate those guys. We do a second cut, yearlings, a third cut, and then we keep those ones. Obviously, I mean, they're always on the spot, they're always on the stage. If they fail for some point, then we just get rid of them. But that's how we actually call the bottom and promote the generation from within. I mean, obviously, there's some concern for people, see, like, oh, it's inbreeding and da. But for most ranchers that I know that are really advanced on their grazing, they also do more like a completely closed herd or almost a closed herd, which is what we do.
Right. Yeah. And I've heard, I don't know what the numbers were, but if it was over 200, the chances of inbreeding were very small. And if you had more than 200 cattle in the herd, the chances of inbreeding being a concern were very small. And then you get that advantage of using cattle that are adapted to the environment when you're keeping your own bulls. So I'm sure that's a big part of success there.
It is. And then if we're talking about drought, if you have adapted cattle that can take this roughage, I mean, a little green and this very rough grass thing, plus, your grazing management, then you will do much better than unadapted, At least you will spend less money or the stock much lower.
Yeah. No, very good. I really appreciate that. Anything else that you really wanted to communicate today before I let you go?
That's pretty much it, Clay. There's a lot, we can talk for days, but right. That will give an idea of the folks listening to your podcast.
Well, sounds very good. Alejandro, I really appreciate your time today. I'm looking forward, as I said multiple times, looking forward to the webinar, and hopefully everybody tuning in will be able to see you on the webinar on Thursday, April 4th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. So until then, Alejandro, we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Well, very good stuff there with Alejandro. Really appreciate his time today. As I said, find the link for the webinar in the show notes page for today, workingcows.net/357. And then also next week on the Working Cows podcast, or just a couple of days from now, as you're listening to this, we'll have an episode with Brett Davis talking about how to keep young families mounted on good horses. So we will see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.